One of the last things I want to say about intersectionality when we talk about talking about identity is that identities cannot be broken down into what we call a sum of the parts. So intersectionality says, okay, well, it's race, it's class, it's gender, it's nationality. All of these things go into creating a social identity. But we can't say that it's if we put in two parts race and three parts gender and so forth, we'll get a specific fit component amalgam of those different pieces, and we can say, look, it's an exact sum of those parts, because it's not, because the different parts are moving, and it's also meaning is created in the tensions among these different parts. So it's not the parts themselves that are important, but the engagement of all the different parts together. So it's about action, and it's about a fluid, energetic engagement with these different ideas. So what are some concerns that people have with intersectionality as a term, as a concept in intercultural communication? Well, the first is they call the race, class, gender, sexuality mantra. That what this can do is, and we can think of this in relationship to, as I just said, you can't think of it as a sum of parts, but it does kind of look like that. So it becomes kind of a flat, superficial, roster-like approach. Okay, what team do I get put on with regards to all of these different things? There's a group of people. So if I'm a straight white Protestant male, I then get grouped in with the straight white Protestant males, and we're all like that. If I'm a Latina lesbian, then I get grouped in with the Latina lesbians. And so there's a concern when you have these types of things where they do in fact think of it as a sum of parts. And so we say that it homogenizes people with similar intersections. If you can say, okay, I've got, I've got four different intersections with this person, I must be the same as them. And that's not how we think of intersectionality in a productive way. It hides how power is involved in the production of social categories and identities. Right? That power is always a factor in here. And when we have this idea, again, when we focus on this notion of these different parts, and we focus on the different parts, we lose this notion of how power, how certain social categories, so Latina lesbian is a social category, or Christian conservative is a social category. There's power involved in the production of those social categories, and power is involved with the way those categories function. We lose that sometimes when we focus on these individual differences between people, right? And it focuses on marked as opposed to unmarked identities. And this is one of the things I think is really important, and I'd say it's significant about a lot of the intercultural communication research. A lot of the intercultural communication research is done by people of color, and it's written in a way to say, okay, most people are not of color, most people in America are not of color, and so we want to help them understand different experiences of others. And so we focus a lot on those others. Also, research-wise, publication-wise, people want to publish things that are different and exotic. So a lot of the work is done on different identities. So they're marked identities. So it could be marked identities with regards to something with respect to skin color or race. It could be marked identities in the sense of people that have sexual orientations outside of the norm, different body performances, different body gender performances, those types of things. We tend to focus on the different from the norm, And as opposed, we kind of normalize the norm then. If we say all of these things are interesting because they're unique, it then normalizes what we consider to be the norm. And finally, it will leave out certain aspects of identity. If we say, okay, we've got these key markers, race, class, gender, sexuality, then we might also miss some other important aspects of identity, especially when those aspects are about people's distinct differences in their lived experience. So we often kind of can focus on these categories and miss the fact that we're talking about living, breathing individuals that have had to walk each day in their own shoes on this earth. And so we kind of forget that and we start focusing again on the categories as opposed to the individuals. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about intersectionality in the next presentation.